I think we have everybody, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. You ready, Denise?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I'd like to open this meeting and call this our special council meeting to order. Again, it is August 11th. First off, after welcome, we'd like to go through the consent agenda, the first item. The consent agenda has city council meeting minutes July 14th and one set of warrants. Entertain some discussion on those or questions or a motion if you're ready.
Mayor?
Tony. Dave, you're
Hello.
muted. Dave, you're muted. Tony?
Go ahead, Tony.
Oh, I was just going to make a motion that we approve of the city council meeting minutes of July 14th, 2020, and the one set of warrants.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
A motion by Tony, second by David, that we pass the city council meeting minutes of July 14th, 2020, and one set of warrants. Is there any discussion on the motion? Questions or discussion? Any questions? David, do you have any questions on it, or you didn't make the motion before?
Yeah, I was trying to make a motion, but
Okay, all right,
It's
good enough.
muted.
Okay. Seeing no discussion, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, motion passed unanimously. The warrants and minutes have been approved. Okay, and action agenda, first time, Denise, have any public comments requested?
No, there was no request made.
Okay, we'll move down to item number 3 then. As you probably remember, last meeting, we discussed Culinary Water Line between Morgan City and then the hotel and the LLC Street group. We had one thing we want to change in that, which was to allow laterals where they prohibit them. And when they sent to them, they were fine with that one. They added the words several times in that document. So the reason we're asking tonight to rescind the last one and just adopt this new one is because they made several changes just to add the words future laterals. For example, on 1-2, they added installing laterals, 2-1, they added laterals, 2-3, they added laterals. They didn't change anything else, and they added the word laterals several places. So instead of trying just to amend the last resolution, I thought it'd be appropriate maybe to rescind that last resolution and pass this new one. And appropriate in a meeting to rescind a prior motion if someone that made that, if someone in favor of that motion is in order to rescind it. So if someone who's in favor of that motion can make a motion to rescind that prior resolution 2023.
Mayor,
Tony,
I will make a motion to reconsider Resolution 2023 regarding the Culinary Water Line non-exclusive easement agreement between Morgan Hotel LLC, C Street LLC, and Morgan City Corporation.
is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved by Tony, second by David, that we reconsider Resolution 2023 Culinary Water Line non-exclusive easement agreement between Morgan Hotel LLC, C Street LLC, and Morgan City Corporation. What reconsideration does, if it's passed, it would take that motion and nullify that prior motion, and therefore that motion would not be would be passed. Then we could reconsider. Then we could talk about it again. So then any discussion, we'll proceed to vote on that. Let's go by roll call vote. Tony,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
and Jeffrey.
I wasn't here to vote. Do I vote on this one? Be considered vote before?
You couldn't have brought it up, you can vote to reconsider. So you've read the minutes. You can vote on the reconsideration,
Okay.
even though you weren't here.
Aye.
Okay.
Reconsider. Perfect.
Ask
Okay.
that the motion is reconsidered. Therefore, that motion is no longer passed and pertinent. Another entertaining motion or questions to consider the new resolution 2023 with the changes made by the hotel people. Questions or a motion?
Maybe just one question. By inserting the word lateral, it appears to me that they're restricting us just to that function. Does that, Ty or Ray, does that cause us any grief?
What they did, they added that. They didn't restrict us to that. Before they eliminated specifically any laterals. When we
Right.
asked if they allow them, well, they allowed those. They didn't take anything else out. They added that to what was already allowed.
But my only point is to add it that many times, multiple times. I'm wondering if they're looking at it to say, we don't want you doing anything other than laterals, but maybe we don't need to do anything more than that.
In each case, it was add. They didn't restrict anything else.
Yes, the places where they added it,
Restricted.
this is Gary, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, please.
But the places where they added it were places where they had previously restricted us from being able to put laterals in. And the members of the city council, I think it was the mayor that might have raised it and asked, well, what if we want to bring a lateral off of the main line and to one of these older businesses in town? And they thought about it. They wanted to restrict us from doing that. There were about 3 or 4 places where it just talked about all we could do is just put the main in. And so in those locations, we also had them adding the words or laterals. And so we can do both now, Dave. And so it's a better deal for us as a result of whoever caught that. I can't remember who caught that last time.
Seemed like Ty was aware of it.
So the other thing, Dave, is they just added a little thing that said with notice. So they're okay with laterals, but they just said that they wanted 30 days notice.
I saw that.
Yeah, and that's
fair.
really so as far as adding, that's the only thing that they added to it is because we took out the restriction, then they said, okay, we're okay with laterals. Just make sure you give us adequate notice.
Okay,
So
that's reasonable.
Any further questions or entertain a motion?
So Mayor,
Tony,
so would the motion need to be worded that we adopt or approve resolution 2023 with the noted changes? Would that be the appropriate motion?
the current 2023 has those changes in it. Just the current resolution 2023 has the changes in it.
Or just simply be to make a motion to approve, adopt resolution 2023?
Yes,
Correct?
yes.
Mayor,
Tony,
I will make a motion to approve, adopt resolution 20-23, the culinary water line non-exclusive easement agreement.
is there a second?
I'll second that.
A motion by Tony, a second by Eric. Do we adopt resolution 2023 culinary water line non-exclusive easement agreement? Any discussion on the motion? Okay, so you proceed to vote. Tony,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Jeffrey,
Aye.
Eric. Eric,
Aye.
David.
Aye.
Okay, motion passed unanimously. Therefore, we adopt resolution 2023. Okay, Eric, in turn time over to Eric for this next item. It's discussion approval on the wildfire participation agreement. Eric, let you explain what that is and tell us about that if you would, please.
You betcha. So what this is an agreement between the Utah Division of Forestry, Fire and State Lands with Morgan City. And what that does for us is we make an agreement with them that we're going to go out and we're going to do some work around our city to help mitigate some of the fire problems or fire areas that maybe would catch a fire. And in turn with that, if we put in that kind of work, then if there was a fire, then the state would kick in and cover those costs to fight that fire. So this has been an ongoing thing for the last several years. And it just so happened that last year at Robinson Springs, we did a whole bunch of cleanup in the year, last year. And we prorated that at $50,000. And because of that amount of work, it actually covered into our next year agreement with the DNR. So it's pretty much that simple. We've been doing this for a few years. It's been working out great for us. In our packets on page, let me get to it, 30 is actually kind of showing a little chart of where we're standing with the work that we've accomplished so far. So that's kind of the short rundown of that.
Go ahead,
Eric,
Dave.
is there a minimum amount of, a minimum dollar amount of work that we have to do each year?
Yeah, that would be the $1,299.
Okay. So for $1,200, they're willing to cover all expenses related to fighting wildfires?
Yes.
That's a bargain.
Yes. It really is.
And David, all ours has to be is just work in kind.
Correct.
Clean up brush or education pieces, anything of value to help hopefully prevent fires from happening.
Ban fireworks.
So Eric, did you say that work at Robinson Springs pretty well covered it for this year?
It did. It did. It kind of covered last year and this year. So we're really covered. They just kind of carried over from the 2020 fiscal years. It's carrying over into this next year.
Could we carry it forward for the next 20 years?
I don't know how far we can carry it forward, but anyway, there's kind of where
As
we're
long
at.
as- As long as all the brush we remove stays away.
Yeah.
Throw a little Roundup on it, huh?
Okay.
Anyway,
Any further discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve that, our participation.
let me get back up to the top of my packet here. Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve the 2021 Wildland Fire Participation Commitment between the Utah Division of Forestry, Fire and State Lands in Morgan City.
Is there a second?
I'll second that, Mayor.
Okay, motion by Eric, second by Jeffrey, that we approve the 2021 Wildfire Participation Commitment between Utah Division of Forestry, Fire and State Lands, and Morgan City. Any discussion on that motion? Okay, we'll proceed to vote. Eric,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Jeffrey,
Aye.
and Tony.
Aye.
A motion passed. Thank you for that. Okay, next item, number 5 on your list is discussion of carbon-free power project. We've kicked that around before multiple times. I think Eric and Dave, you're maybe new to the discussion. Ty, would you take a minute and update us on just a rough overview, and then we'll open up for questions and discussions from the council. While Ty's getting unmuted and starting to talk there, reminder, tonight's discussion, it's not necessarily up for approval or disapproval tonight. We don't need to make a motion. We got some more time. So this is just discussion. We'll take a couple more weeks to think about and mull over and ask more questions before we make a decision one way or the other on this. Okay, Ty.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. That'll be really helpful to me as well. So after this meeting, if you have specific questions or want me to dig in a little deeper in any one area, that's kind of the point, is to introduce it tonight and bring it up for action at the next meeting. So As you know, we're part of the Carbon Free Power Project, which is a small nuclear reactor plant in Idaho. It's at INL, a National Laboratory. So that project it's been structured with several off ramps, and so we approve it just a step at a time. Right now is it's one of those off ramp. You can either leave the project or stay the same, or you can increase your entitlement share if you want more power out of the project. And what it is it's approving another budget and plan of finance. So originally we were supposed to be done with phase 1 already, and we've extended. This is the second time we're extending the deadline on phase 1. The UAMPS wants to make sure that they de-risk the project as much as possible. And what's happened over this last budget period is renegotiating the contract or the agreement with the Department of Energy. So last time we did this, there was, if you remember, the JUMP module, which the Department of Energy was going to own. They were going to build 2 of the reactors and then use one for research and the other one for power. And then they were going to sell or basically give that reactor back to the membership. And so it was going to provide cheap power because we wouldn't have to pay the capital costs on those 2 reactors. Since then, they decided it doesn't make any sense for them to own and operate a reactor inside of the larger project, and I agree. But what they did is they upped the dollar amount that they're willing to put towards this project. And so they're right now in negotiation with UAMPS to get that agreement signed. So now their level of commitment's up to, I think 1.4 billion. Let me look at the agreement. I'm on page 31. See if the numbers will just jump out at me here. Yeah, so it's actually page 32. So their cost share of the whole project, their commitment now is increased to 1.4 billion, which helps develop the new technology, because a small nuclear reactor is a new way of doing this, and they have a pretty big interest in seeing that play out, because this could be a really good way of balancing the energy need of the nation into the future. So anyway, what this does is this next budget plan of finance will take us to the end of phase 1, which is 2023. And our cost share means that we're going to be paying that out of our own. If the project fails at the end of phase 1, then we would owe an estimated $130,826. That would be our portion. If the project continues at that point, then there's really no cost obligation. It'll all be rolled into the project as the project will basically move forward, because phase 2 is the kind of that jumping off point to saying everything's in order, the licensing, the permitting, everything's approved, the agreements are in place, and it's hitting the price targets. So there's a economic competitive test that they run. I think it's still a little premature to get good numbers out of that, because there's no bidding, there's no actual cost coming in yet. But basically that's for the project management committee, the PMC at UAMPS, which I'm a member of. We decide if we're comfortable with the project moving forward or not. This is just the city council's role is to say if you're comfortable remaining in the project, and if we want to decrease the amount or increase the amount that we'll get. So right now our commitment level is basically the exact amount of power that we need to replace the coal plants that we have in our portfolio. We're still about 30% hydroelectric power, which is good. And we just don't have a good replacement for base load. You'll remember when I first got here, I voted or recommended that we got out of the project, because if all of our eggs are in this basket, we really don't have the ability to develop new ways to generate power. I worked on that for 2 years and really can't see of any other thing on the horizon to give us a base load replacement. The energy markets are getting very volatile with the wind and solar. They work well when the wind is blowing and when the sun is shining, and have made really cheap power during a few hours of the day, but it doesn't carry the whole load through the rest of the time. So to me, it makes sense to stay in the project. It's relatively low risk, I think $130,000 for potentially just over a megawatt of power on the back end at 5.5 cents is worth the risk. It's a very complicated project, but I don't see it working anywhere else where the INL has the zoning and everything in place. I can't imagine it working in somebody else's neighborhood or backyard or near public lands or anywhere else. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I'll just see what questions you have. I will say that the PMC, so our commitment is being in the project, but the decision making's from the project management committee, and there's most of the votes come from those entities that have the majority of the subscription. So, 10 of the entities have about 40% of all of the subscriptions. So they have the most risk, but they also have the most say if the project continues or not. And the project management committee has said, we're willing to extend phase 1. We're going to stay in it. But we're making it contingent on the agreement with the DOE, make sure licensing happens. They're really not going to let the project go on if everything doesn't get lined up by the end of this extended period. So any questions you have?
I
Yep.
have a boatload of them. So
Okay.
I'm going to refer to this letter from Scott Fox that you sent to us, talking about current obligation.
Okay.
So just help me understand this, and I apologize for just kind of walking
No, it's
through
good.
this. So they're projecting a $4,787,101 deficit in total at the end of September. Morgan City's portion, 0.6563 would be 31,418. If Morgan City was to drop out, Morgan would have 12 months to coordinate payment of that deficit position. So my first question is if we don't drop out, are we obligated to pay that $31,000? No.
No.
Okay.
So what that does is if we drop out, we're paying, because we put more burden on the remaining members. We owe the remaining members $31,000, the ones that stay in the project. So they're not hurt by us leaving the project. So up to this point, that's how much we've spent, and that's how much we would owe the remaining members.
And then the next paragraph down, it says, Morgan to date has paid 14,693. Help me there. I'm gonna have a little bit of a disconnect there. So we paid 14,693, or have we paid 31,418?
Nope, we've paid 14,693 up to this point, but we haven't paid anything since the last budget. That's how much over the course of how many years we've been in this project. That's how much we've paid, but our portion of the debt right now is 31,000.
So would we have to make up that, difference at some point?
We would just have to pay the 31,000 right now. So if we stay in the project and the project comes to fruition, we don't owe anything, because all of those capital costs will get financed into the operation of the facility.
Okay,
And that just is that's what will determine our price of power. And so what it's saying is, if we bill right now, we owe 31,000. And the next thing is, if we vote to stay in at the same amount that we have, and we go to the end of phase 1 and the project fails, then that's when we would owe the 130,000.
Okay, that was my next question. So Morgan City's share of UAMPS incurred costs for licensing period phase 1 remaining are estimated at $130,826, the end of the first licensing period. So if that doesn't come to fruition, or this fails, we're obligated to pay that $130,000. So
Yep.
that's essentially the risk.
Yep. And that's what every member would be paying. So everybody that's in the project right now would be paying their proportionate share for the amount that we spent up to the end of licensing the phase 1.
Okay.
Ty, isn't there?
We would, sorry, Dave.
But
Go
just
ahead.
on that subject, that's what our liability is to date, but there's still more spending to take place in phase 1. Don't we have a maximum of 800,000 that could be spent of our money? Is that all part of phase 1? As time goes on,
Yeah.
if we stay in.
Yeah, but there's a cost sharing and agreement. So UAMPS doesn't owe the entire amount, if I understand that correctly. So I guess I'll say it 2 different ways. So if the whole
On your agreement, the way I understand that, you're reading that, says license phase 1. And it says developing cost about 852,000. Underneath that, it says including DOA and new skill cost sharing. The way I understand that concept, and Ty helped clarify this, is if DOE and new skill wasn't there, we'd owe the 852,000. But since DOE and new scale is cost sharing it, our cost goes down to 130,000. Part of why I read this document from the committee is that they're not going to proceed and go forward unless DOE and new scale is signed on the cost sharing. In this document, Scott gives you both scenarios, with DOE's participation, without their participation. That's the way I read and understand it. Well, I understand, yeah, they don't have the exact numbers. These are still estimates and guesstimates. I can be wrong. Help clarify that. If any of you read that differently, or Ty, help clarify that, see if that's the way it is, or if I'm misreading that.
Yeah, so it's the same scenario we're in now. It's just that if we go to the end of phase 1 and then we bail out, we would owe the 162, because it would be the 130 plus the 31,000. But our portion of the entire project is 852, but that's a cost sharing agreement that we've already had with DOE and NewScale.
But
So if we,
that-
go ahead.
That commitment isn't in place for the moment between DOE and NewScale.
Right, so UAMPS or the project, well, it was
Yes.
earlier, right? So that's
Yeah.
why we've come so far with only paying 15,000, is because we've been cost sharing as we go. So every month, NewScale puts in so much of their cost, DOE's paid so much of their cost, and UAMPS has paid their cost. So we're developing the site. NewScale's developing the technology and paying for all the licensing applications and that sort of thing. So there is a cost sharing agreement, but the new agreement isn't in place moving forward into phase 2 to build out. So that's the contingent. That's what we're saying is we don't want to go to phase 2 if we don't get those agreements in place from phase 2 on.
UAMPS would not move into phase 2 until that was in place.
Right. That's what the project management committee has done. They said, let's basically not move forward. Let's extend phase 1 for a couple of years and make sure we get all of these things in order before we take this big jumping off point and owe the big dollar amounts. And so even though we're participating and these are all up to amounts, at any time, the project management committee can say, hey, this isn't panning out, or these agreements aren't coming together. We're gonna vote to fold. And as we go, we also approve purchases as we go. So we have control over what UAMPS does as a project management committee. We say, no, we're not comfortable doing that yet. Let's hold and make sure that this comes in order before or let's see some progress or some commitment on the other side. So anyway, that's kind of how that
So Ty,
mechanics of that works.
so at the end of phase 1, 2 scenarios, either if we dropped out on our own or it just folded, as you said, the UAMPS decided to shelve the project. We are obliged to pay this $162,000. Is that correct?
Ty, help out there. There's an agreement in place with NewScale and DOE that if the project stops and goes south, they said they'd reimburse 80% of the cost.
So that's, I guess it depends.
At 80% if the project ceases. That's an agreement we have with the DOE and NewScale.
80% of the 160,000.
That's the
So-
way I understand it.
Yeah, so it depends on the conditions that the project ends. So if and I probably should have explained that better. So we have that economic competitive test, but if the whole thing fails because it's not going to be feasible, then we get reimbursed. So if we go in and they say, hey, we just keep running models and now the number is 8 cents a kilowatt hour because the technology didn't prove out, then we would get reimbursed. If we just decide, you know what, we're tired of doing this and we end the project, then we're kind of on the hook for our portion because we didn't give a good faith effort to have that project come to fruition. If the project continues and we bail out as a city at the end of phase 1, then that's when we would owe the 162.
So it says 5.5 cents, sort of their breaking point, Ty.
Yeah, that's what the agreement is that we should be able to produce power for 5.5 cents in 2018 dollars. Mhm.
What's the pool price? What's an average pool price right now?
It fluctuates, but it's about 4 cents.
Mm-hmm.
So the new technology so that's kind of what we're looking at is down the road, we can't guarantee that the price of energy is going to stay at 4 cents. And a lot of that is including the coal plants that we have, right? The coal is really has been the efficient or cost-effective way to produce power, but the wind energy that we generate is about 7 or 8 cents. Like it's never gone below 7 cents a kilowatt hour. And so it kind of seems like, well, I thought that was supposed to be the free energy.
Yeah.
But the amount of energy, because the wind is free, but the capital costs, and then the variability of the wind makes it a really expensive cost of power. And so we kind of look down the future that, solar's big hope is that if we have battery storage, but the cost of doing batteries at that scale is likely going to be way higher than 5.5 cents. And so everybody's comfort level, if we can get base load power for 5.5 cents, we feel like that's a really good bet into the future, because everybody else that has gone more to renewables is seeing their costs go way up.
Just for reference, mention hydro. How much is hydro?
So I didn't hear everything you said, but it's about 3 cents.
Yeah, just to put everything in perspective.
Yeah, and then the challenge with hydro is there's no way anybody's going to allow new hydro to be developed. So
Right.
Every source of power that you have, doesn't matter where you generate it, it's being challenged by environmental groups on one side or the other. Not the same environmental groups, but the hydro is dangerous to fish. We put up windmills and they kill birds. You do solar and it disrupts the ground species and is reflective and causes problems with aircraft and reflective to heat to other areas. So it's a real challenge to figure out where this is all gonna end up.
There's always the bald eagle.
Yeah.
Spotted owl.
Yeah.
Yep. So Tony, are we?
I guess the only other question I would have is, so you said it's 5.5 cents per 2018 dollars. I realize, so it'll go up incrementally, but what is that based on? Is it based on CPI or, the inflationary rate? I mean, how do they base that? Do you know?
Yeah, just based on inflation, but that's the target. But see, the PMC can still at any point after they run these tests, they can say, okay, so it looks like it's going to end up at 6 or 6.5 cents or 7. They can still vote to move forward with the project. We're just saying if it doesn't come in under 5.5 cents, then we have the option to end the project and get reimbursed.
Okay.
Because of the promise of what the new technology will provide.
Okay.
So that's a negotiating point, but everything right now is just based on these very complicated models of what it'll take to come in at that rate. And it's really just it comes down to if the reactors get approved or not by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions, thoughts, input?
Ty, as I understand, we have until about the middle of September. We have we're on one of those points where we can elect to opt out, and we have until the middle of September to do that. And I'll come back to maybe talk just a little bit about that, just so that we all understand, again, some of what we're needing to decide. After, let's say we elect to opt in, when's our next option to opt out?
So it would be at the end of this budget and plan of finance. Right now is tied to the end of phase 1. So if all of the money gets spent and then we're not done with licensing, then when that new budget is spent, then it's an automatic, we got to go back to our governing boards and say, do we keep going, or are we done? So that's why it's all an up to a dollar amount, is because we're only approving the current proposal from UAMPS to take us to the end of the licensing period. But we also can have control over that as we go to, on how that budget gets spent. So it's either once that money is spent and we need to make any budget adjustments, or we've made it to the end of phase 1 and we're ready to make the big commitment to phase 2. And then that would be our next off ramp.
The budget proposal that they're rolling out, how much more obligation or liability does that give us? How much of that budget are we liable for or responsible for?
That's what that 162,000 would be. So it's an additional 130,000.
Okay.
That's what it's saying, is our approval means that we recognize that.
Committing to up to that amount. Okay. And I think that's one of our considerations is, what can we afford? I mean, in my mind, that's affordable. And talking to both Ty and Ray, we can collect that as we go about just our day-to-day activity. But when you start seeing the $800,000 figures, those are a little pricey, I think, for our operation. So
yeah, so that's why we've extended phase 1 like we have. This was supposed to have we were supposed to have been in phase 2 already, and the membership has all decided we would rather take a little bit, pay our own way for this next little while and make sure this thing comes together before we make that big commitment. So our idea is by the time we go to phase 2, that we wouldn't owe anything at that point, because that means the project is really ready to go through, and we have licensing. So it means that it's not a risk of, hey, do you think that the the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is going to approve of this technology? And so it means that the technology's all been proved out, permitted, and then it just goes into, now it just becomes an actual project where you just build it out. So
the vetting statement's taken place.
Right.
So phase 2 is you reach phase 2, you've really sort of reached the point of no return.
Right.
And also when you're in phase 2, there's no more, you're not obligated any more out of pocket. Everything's going to be paid back by future rates. Is that correct?
Yep. It'll become operational cost in the project, financed over however many years.
Of course, we get paid back when everything's in place. An investor, look at it this way, an investor won't give you his money until he knows that it's operating, that it's going to function the way it's supposed to. In other words, it's got to be happening before we get paid back. So we carry the risk during the construction and during the permitting, because that's where the most risk is. But once that risk is taken away, then the investor steps in and says, oh, it's up and running. Here's your money. I'll just collect my return now. But they're not willing to take the risk on the front end.
Yeah, and that's what's nice about the DOE fronting the development costs. So they're in for $1.4 billion, which will ensure that the project gets built and it's running. And then our return is we'll always own a portion of that project, and we have a power sales contract, so we can take the power we can sell that power at whatever rate, right? But our rate is based on our being in, our better rate is because we've been in from early on. So later what they'll do is they'll take on additional ownership if, you know, as they expand it out, but their portion of the rate that they're charged for the power that's produced will be higher because they'll be covering a little higher debt service than the initial members.
So Ty, I'd like to talk just a little bit about maybe some of the elements that are going to create risk, and where this is for discussion purposes, and where we have an opportunity to exit on September 14th. I think we need to be comprehensive in our consideration so that we make the right decision. But here's some things to keep in mind. Number one, this is the first of its kind in the world. And there are other programs, other sciences, if you will, that are competing to be similarly productive. I imagine maybe not unlike finding a cure for the pandemic, it's a race to see who does it and which one works and which one's viable. But being first, and UAMPS is the player that has come together with the NuScale and the Department of Justice to do that. So in that light, I think where it's new, there's a lot of criticism out there. There's a lot of critics that will say it probably won't work, and you may not want to be doing it. So I just for fun, I looked at the UAMPS. Ty handed me a 2018 annual report, and what do we have? Some maybe 4 dozen members, and of those, about 3 dozen have signed on to the carbon-free project, i.e., the small modular nuclear reactor. And I was interested to see if they signed on in relation to the maybe power that they take from UAMPS. And there was a little bit of a glaring, and I'll just throw this out, but a little bit of a glaring void in my mind. And out of the top 5 members in UAMPS, the top 5 consumption in UAMPS, between the top 5, they take about 40% of the electricity from UAMPS. There was only one of those 5 that has bought into the small nuclear. And so I look at it and say, are we missing something? And I'm just throwing this out for consideration. We may be, we may not, but let me just identify those 5 because I think some of it can be explained. The very largest user of energy in UAMPS is Lower Energy. They're number 1, although Ty mentioned to me that that's a co-op, so they're dropping into UAMPS just for a program here or a program there. So they may have their own thing going, and nuclear may not be part of their plan. The second largest consumer is St. George, and they have not opted in. They produce about 14% of their own power and get others I won't say exclusively from UAMPS, but nonetheless, that's a good question. Why aren't they interested in it? Number 3 is Idaho Falls, and of course the power is in their backyard. They're familiar with it. That probably makes sense that they would be part of it. Number 4 is Lehigh. Why aren't these guys big on it? Number 5 is Murray. We don't see them in it either. So, there might be, and there may be some room, and I may reach out just to see why some of these bigger customers aren't interested in it.
So Lehigh is in it.
Have they?
They're one of the biggest. They're the second largest subscribers. in the project. And then the other ones that you mentioned, it's interesting because none of those are part of Hunter and San Juan. And both of those are coal plants that are scheduled to come offline in the next 10 years. And so kind of, I don't know either, you know, we kind of talked about that last night. I don't know what everybody's exact portfolio looks like. But as you look at St. George and some of those, they're not replacing current coal-fired power plants that are scheduled to be decommissioned. So as long as they have a source that isn't going away in the near future, their need or that gap that we have, you know, as you looked at our model, if you don't have that need, then you don't really have a sense of urgency to fill that base
If you
load.
pull that list that Denise sent out,
Yeah, did
Um,
Lehigh join
okay.
in after the fact?
did you look at that list, Dave?
Here, I
Yeah,
can
I was-
screen share it.
I was
So let
maybe
me
look-
screen share that.
Yeah, I was maybe looking at an old one, I wondered.
Yeah,
Lehigh's in for 20,000 kilowatts.
20 megawatts. huh?
yes. Let me
Well, then-
share my screen.
Murray's in for 14,000. Iowa Falls in for 14,000.
Oh, then, okay, well then that's a new list. I was going off of the old one from when, I guess at the very beginning.
Oh,
I-
actually, Dave, what you were probably going off of is at the back of that report,
Okay,
the operational report. Were you going off of the annual report?
part of the information was, but
Okay.
the other part came, the subscription came from the PowerPoint that was given to.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
given
so-
to you at the very beginning.
Yeah, so I gave you that PowerPoint because our council had seen that a couple years ago. And I was just trying to bring you up to speed on the overview of the whole project.
Uh-huh.
And then this email that I think Denise just sent out is the current as of the end of July, well, July 2019, but subscriptions haven't changed because until right now. And so
Yeah.
can you see my screen? Is it shared?
Yeah, I'm pleased to see Lehigh and Murray on there. That there's 3 out of
Yeah.
the big 5, the top 5, and like I say, the co-op isn't. We can probably throw that out, and who knows what St. George is doing. So I feel better
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah,
to be
so Lehigh's interesting because they just last year they put in a generating facility on natural gas
Mhm.
that's only about half capacity, and they only run it a couple hours a day. But they have a scheduler that looks at the market rate, and they have about a hour window to decide whether to ramp that up or not.
Is that
But they
right?
look at that as just a way to levelize their
Yeah.
hourly demand. They don't look at that as a way to, if they were going to do full natural gas all day long, then their power would be way more expensive.
Mhm. It's certainly not efficient to do it that way, but it solves a problem, I suppose.
Yeah, and natural gas has its own barriers too because it's a carbon source, and a lot of the governments are going carbon free on their regulations, and so that's one of the other things looking into the future is most of the carbon free sources are renewable and not a very good source for base load other than nuclear.
So here's just for information, a little bit of an interesting insight. Morgan, we draw, again, this is as of 2018, we draw about half of a megawatt, is that right? Every year, our peak load. And
Yeah, we peak at about 5.
yeah, and at our 1 megawatt that we would take would be about the same. We'd be taking in comparison about as much from the carbon free as we do from the UAMPS total. But here's a couple of other interesting ones that have shows some interest in the project. Brigham City, for example, is 2.4% of UAMPS, and yet they're taking 5.2 of the nuclear. Heber is 2.5 of UAMPS, and they're taking 4.7. Kaysville is 2.9% of UAMPS, and they're taking 3.5. Here's Logan. They've really bought in. They take 5.5 megawatts of. They're 5.5% of UAMPS total, and they bought in at 14%. Los Alamos is 5.5 and 7.5. So, interestingly, a lot of them are buying in it, and I think that helps explain your point, Ty, that they're looking to replace base loads.
Yeah, so the project participants aren't just going in because they're pro nuclear. I mean, there's a couple that are, but
Yeah,
that's, I mean,
Falls, yeah.
Well, and Idaho Falls probably still has a demand out there with no good base load to replace it with. And so when you remove all of the politics and all of the media, and it's really just a matter of conceiving of alternatives and what those are. So I'm just saying, from an administrative position, that's kind of where I've been on both sides of this project, and I couldn't find any other viable base load. And I would really hate to see us get into a situation where we're changing our power bill by the hour. So if you're ever a Rocky Mountain customer's home, just ask them to see their power bill, and you can see there's like 8 different rates based on time of day, like all kinds of things. And that's because they're just following the hourly market and passing it through. And ours has been very consistent and steady, and we've gotten really close sometimes, to that margin. Like last year, we had a couple months where I thought we're going to have to raise the power rates, but then on a low water year, or you got something shut down because of wildfires, or there's all these contingencies, but we've done a really good job of being able to levelize that cost over a year, because we do have a steady, and the hydro that we have follows our demand. We have a lot of summer demand and not so much on the winter. And so that fits really nicely. And it's just a matter of everybody's portfolio looks different, and the better you can do early on to identify those sources of power. And we haven't oversubscribed by any means. So that one megawatt, our peak is actually 5 megawatts in the summer. Our whole system is a 5 megawatt system, but it does fill a gap from losing those coal sources that we're about to lose. So.
Any questions?
Yeah, so if we lost I don't say if it's when we lose the coal sources, if those are not replaced, would we expect an increase in rates?
Potentially, yeah, based on our current model, but they will not be replaced by other coal just because it's not financially feasible. So
right.
The rates that we're getting from coal is because the capital costs have already been paid for. And if you had to build a plant today and then have the operational costs associated with coal, then it's just not cost effective to do new coal at this point. So.
In other words, we'd be left with going out to a pool, and then those rates can change based on supply and demand. That could even become unreasonable if it got too tight.
Yeah, and by then there's probably going to be an app where you can buy and sell power from each other, driving the cost even higher. So who knows what technology will do to us in the future, but.
mean, I can sell my power to Tony.
I
There's
don't either,
places,
going off the grid.
yeah,
Yeah. Right on.
there's places trying to accomplish just that
Mhm.
in different markets, because they're putting solar panels and figuring out, well, that it doesn't pay out like I thought it was, and the city's not buying it. So if I can create an app to sell my solar power to somebody else and get those energy credits working, they're really trying to go that direction, but it's like day trading with power. So good luck to whoever wants to do that.
Other questions, further questions, thoughts?
We'll vote on the next meeting whether to stay in or out.
Yeah, so the deadline is September, but the earlier we move on it, I think the better it is for UAMPS to figure out where people are at. And then they can get their part of it done in September. And so I don't know what our agenda items look like in September, but I wanted to introduce it at this meeting. And then if we're ready in August, on the 25th, to act on it then. And then if we do, if we do need more time, we can definitely do the first meeting in September. So.
Okay.
And if you have any specific questions that you want me to ask some of the other membership, just let me know. How they view it. It's very difficult to say how you view the project, because you got the UAMPS membership, the representatives, and every one of them have a governing board that every time they have an election cycle,
Changes.
they really don't know how, yeah. And then whoever listens to what on the media, or, sometimes that has more to do with it than the actual viability of the project. So it changes a lot.
Eric, any questions, thoughts?
I've been sitting here listening to all this, and we've been talking about this power for a while. I mean, it's hard because we're trying to see into the future where we don't have a clear vision, if that makes sense. Because, I mean, what the technology is going to be in the future, we don't know. That's the hard question for us. I've been sitting here thinking, our portion, I realize we're going to try to cover back what we're going to lose from the coal-fired power plants. And that was always a big kind of steady part of our portfolio, like Ty was saying. It's to me, we need to find something to replace that, a nice steady power source that we can just rely on. I think I've been back and forth too on this, and still got to put a little thought into it. But I'm almost wondering if we, as our city grows, we're getting more residents here, if we need to kind of think about maybe upping our kilowatt hours that we'd want to have in that project. But I'm not saying I'm going to vote that way. I'm just having those thoughts. I'm just expressing what I'm thinking. So.
Jeffrey, any thoughts you got? Eric?
I'm done.
Jeffrey, any thoughts you got?
I chatted with Ty earlier in the week, yesterday, I guess, and I really enjoy turning the light switch on and having light turn on. We've got to have power come from somewhere, and I don't want to have to go chase the market. And I hope this technology will. I don't know. I guess I hope we can come up with something even better here in the near future. But we need to be able to have a sustainable base load to be able to make sure we can present to our citizens, and they can keep their power on. So, right now, I haven't seen, or nobody's been able to show me anything that's given us a better option. I know it makes a little heartburn to commit this kind of money, but right now it is our best option, and we've gone this far. Like Eric just said, are we taking enough for the growth that's coming into Morgan? Is there an option? I don't think our growth's gonna turn, we're gonna have more houses come in, and I hope we're making the decision today that can accommodate that into the future to keep the lights on. So I think we need to keep chasing this can down the road and see where it ends. And, if we can get everything pushed through and we get a plant going, I think we need to stay in our seat. So that's my 2 cents.
Jeff, you any thoughts, questions?
No, just other than I think we need to stay on board with it for a while yet. Because I love turning my lights on and off at night too.
Tony, any further thoughts?
Yeah, I think in my mind, it's a question of how much can we afford to lose, and we can spend that 130 to 160 and still life goes on. Our lights still turn on.
Okay. Tony?
I think it probably is really risky to sit back and say, well, as far as technology is concerned, what's going to develop in the next 5 or 7 years? I mean, the risk is maybe nothing. This is, certainly a possibility for future power. So, I like Ty said, I really don't see anything else out there on the horizon right now, and I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't tell you if anything's coming down the pipe. So this might be prudent that we seriously look at this.
Oh, appreciate it. I encourage you to go through the documents and stuff that Denise has sent out to you. Look at those. And for the questions, feel free to call, talk with Ty, or you can call the UAPS people too. They'd be happy to talk with you. If you want to talk to, Scott on finances, or, they're they'd be happy to talk to you. 2 or 3 years ago, we went through this. I made a list, and maybe Tony and Jeff, you remember this. I called multiple other cities to talk to them. So if you want to do that, that's certainly out there and open to try and gain some more data. You mentioned St. George, Dave, and when I talked with them, their concept at that point was that they were not seeing an increase in their power needs because of the many people were doing going solar. I didn't find anybody else that saw that happening. Everybody else saw an increase in their need and their need to supply more electricity. Everybody else saw more things going power, more gadgets, more stuff requiring power. Even though they're getting more efficient, we're still getting more and more gadgets. There's a push for electric cars. Tony mentioned, I don't know what the future is going to bring as far as new technologies. I think there's going to be some. A lot of those, I think, will be use of power, not necessarily how to generate power. Like that's my thoughts on those kind of things. Reach out, whoever you think you'd like to talk with and visit with, and get some more information. Got some more data, share it with us. If you find something, share it with us. Communicate with, UAPS, with Ty, with myself, or with any of the other cities if you'd like to. That'd be my thought on it as we go forward.
Mayor, one quick question.
Go ahead.
I don't mean to belabor this, but I sitting here thinking about this. So we've had some growth in Morgan the last 10 years, obviously. Well, how much has our demand grown for power in the last decade?
Good question. I don't know. Maybe look that up. Ty knows. We can look at that and see.
I thought I heard Rocky Mountain one time say their demand's not going up simply because you mentioned it, Mayor. So many of the things are becoming more, efficient,
Right.
LED and things like that. So I guess I'm curious as to what our demand has done in the last 10 years. So I might,
Good question. Good question.
Take a look at that,
Morgan's, this is as of 2018, but Morgan's energy growth rate is 2.7%. Probably year over year.
Yeah.
So another consideration that some of the cities look at is if they're landlocked.
Right.
Right. So
build out.
Right. So we do have areas that can be annexed. And the other the other thing is the potential for heavy users. And so we have an industrial park that hasn't been developed. And so you look at someone like Hiram and they have one customer that has a dedicated substation, right? So that business, you can have another business want to do the same thing that's all refrigerated, some sort of a packing plant or an automated facility. Or, you know, for us, it could just be somebody that grows marijuana indoors. Could be a huge disruption to our system.
that-
And so it's
Is that
it's hard to
legal?
look,
It will
yeah,
be.
if you're permitted by the state, but I guess my point is when you're small, it's really very difficult to judge your future growth on, you know, some of those decisions that we might make because we say, hey, we want a major employer. That sounds awesome. Or that's a cabinet maker or whoever that could really change our portfolio or our demand in a hurry. And then some of the other cities that have been built out feel a lot more comfortable about what they have available to them. And Hiram's like one of those growth cities where they can, you know, I think they annexed like 400 acres last year just for a new subdivision. And so it's an interesting concept, but a lot of it just depends on us being aware of ourselves and making those decisions for our future needs. And like, you know, Eric said, it might not be enough. And that it is, we are in at a very conservative level because we still are going to need, based on our current subscription, we are going to need more power from somewhere. We're not going to, you know, by the time this comes online, won't be a lot, but we'll need a whole other megawatt from somewhere. And then you have a big customer come to town and you have to be able to tell them if we can service them or not. You know, and we want to be able to make those decisions too. But I just look at the area that we do have to develop is a lot of it's under the industrial zone. So there's potential that we could be you know, have one of those years where we need a lot more power.
Okay, thank you. Any last parting comments? If not, we'll go to city reports. We'll have Ty go through his manager reports and then council suggestion reports. I'd like to have you go through those. So Ty, start your management reports.
Okay, so just an update on the COVID-19 situation. Our offices are still by appointment only. I don't know if you've had any feedback. It's been working for us. We are having a plexiglass installed up on our front counter, and that's kind of the trigger point that I think makes sense to open the office so that we're not worrying about demanding face masks and who has them. We can just open the office at that point and keep our people on this side of the glass. Congress is still arguing about another package that they're going to send out. The president did a couple of executive orders on his own that will probably get challenged. But one of the good indicators is that the money that was already appropriated, there's a likelihood that they're going to loosen the restrictions on what is eligible for that money to be spent. And our state's already divided up into 3 different tranches. And so I feel pretty comfortable that we'll spend the first $130,000 and likely be eligible for an additional $130,000. And that's based on what's eligible. So we're doing some technology improvements and we're going to have fiber at a couple of our other facilities so that our guys can operate off of Wi-Fi and stay remote, not have to drive back to the city office as much. And so anyway, that just keeps progressing. It looks like the state numbers are finally starting to trend down. We'll just see what happens once school starts. But like I said, my goal is just to make sure that our plexiglass project gets completed. So any questions or feedback on where we're at? Okay, Utopia, we're at 662. That's about 35 more than we had at the last meeting. So the big rush, I think, has slowed down, and now we're just on a steady increase of customers. So we're about 45% take rate, and we're 162 above that 30% that we needed. But it still seems like subscriptions are happening, so that's good. The water line project, maybe I'll have Jeff give this update, but anyway, the water line between State Street and 300 West is complete. So that water line finally got installed, and then there's a couple of other areas, 700 East, that are being worked on. But that project is moving forward. I will say, just budget wise, we split that project into last year's and this year's budget, but the entire project is going to have to come out of this year's budget in the water fund. And so we'll keep track of that, but we'll likely need to do make that part of the amended budget at the end of the year. The water line to the hotel, we don't need to talk about because we just did on that resolution. That was kind of an update before it came back to be an action item. Power outages, you notice that we've had several power bumps, maybe more on the Mahogany Ridge and the new substation. Just a lot of it's just been bird outages. So that we get the seasonal influx of birds. They all congregate, touch wings, and one of them gets zapped and they all fly away. But the system's functioning as it should. Instead of shutting the power down, it'll flicker, and that's a good thing. It's called a recloser. So when there's a fault on the line, it'll trip, and it's designed to do that 3 times in a row. So you'll see 3 flickers before the power goes out if it's functioning correctly, and before it would sense a fault and just shut down the whole substation. So what happens is it'll reclose the first time. If the fault's still there, then it'll reclose again. And if our fuses are coordinated right, it'll just blow the fuse closest to wherever that outage is. So if it's a tree limb or something that's causing the fault, then it'll blow the fuse and the rest of the system will still function. So everybody will see a power bump, but they won't lose power. So these little bumps are actually a good sign that our system's better than it was. But we do need to go retrofit a lot of the power lines so that there's more spacing, so that these clusters of birds will stop arcing, and it's designed that one single bird will not get zapped because of the distances between the insulators and the power line. But when they swarm and cover the whole thing, then they're bridging that gap. So we got to cover them with plastic and a couple of different things. So our guys are trying to identify where the problem areas are, and it's just a constant effort to keep making improvements. We have had a couple of Rocky Mountain power bumps. I think about 3 of them that we know were system-wide, and the other ones have been birds. The other good news is it hasn't been much as far as tree limbs because of that early project that we did. If you remember, that contract that we did for the tree removal seemed to really help out. So anyway, we'll stay on that. And then if you ever have a concern, just let me know. I was going to do an update to the council, but every time we have another bump, it hasn't caused really any long-term outages. And so I just, if I don't get a call, I assume that everybody's aware that that's how our system functions, and kind of save those big updates for when we lose a whole leg or we're out for an extended period of time. But we haven't had those extended outages that we used to. And so I think it's getting better. But if you get questions, those bumps are normal. It's not a surge in power. It's not frying your equipment. It's how the system's designed to operate. A couple other things I didn't list. Our RFP for our general plan update is complete. Like, we have it all together and it's on the agenda for the Planning Commission. So next Tuesday, we're going to present the RFP to the Planning Commission and just get their feedback before we send it out and get a contractor. So part of that is just to inform them of the elements of the general plan, and also to maybe get some buy-in or see if they're interested in any certain area, so that when we get that contractor on board, maybe our Planning Commission wants to pay attention to certain elements of the general plan as we go through that process. Last thing is, we've been working on a lot line adjustment over at the school. I think this came from Tony as a project. And let me just share the screen here so you can see what we've come up with. All the survey work has been done. Let's see. Can you see that, or do I need a make this full screen? Is that better?
No, it's smaller.
Now it's smaller now?
Yeah, it was better before.
Oh, I just made it full screen, so that's better?
Yeah, that's better. Well, on mine, maybe nobody else.
Mine is.
Okay, so you can see that this line right here was where the original boundary is. And so we owned quite a bit of the school property. We own the outfield of this ball diamond and their practice, or their some of their events over here. That's our substation. And so what we did is we had it resurveyed, and we're going to move that boundary just to follow this line right here, so that the trail system is on our property. And then right here, we're actually going to transfer property that the school owns back, or from the city back to the school, because it crosses the trail system. So this has all been resurveyed. And then this elbow over here, we've moved this line too to accommodate the bridge project, so that our bridge project is not on school property. So can you see my mouse too?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure what everybody could see. So we've had it all resurveyed. Scott McMillan and I have been working on, we've been out to say, hey, this makes sense. This is a good marker, a good point to survey from. And there's going to be 3 transfers of property. So this first one, parcel A, is going to go a deed from the city to the school. This property here is going to go from the school to the city. And then this parcel across the river, this entire property right here is right now the school district's, and they're going to deed that property to the city. And then of course, this is the bridge. So instead of just having this sliver of property, we're gonna own the property from the bridge clear around this bend over to there. It's what we did is, because it's an equivalent amount of property transferring both ways, because this portion right here was such a large tract of land, then we're able to pick up this other sliver on the other side of the river, which would allow us to do something, we can get recreation grants or something to do river access, or a pocket park, or trailhead, or something of that nature. So the school board is getting this is on their agenda tonight. So they always bring a topic up and then they vote on it the next month. And so they're scheduled to vote on it in September. We want to have all of the properties transferred before we start the UDOT project, so it doesn't cost us anything or once they start the project, if there's land swapping going on, it complicates the bridge project, which is getting started right now. So is there any questions about that or concerns, or any, do we need to talk offline or?
So Ty, will we still have access, or do we need additional easements to our substation?
No, so that's still in place. Yep, so that won't change. The property line will be on our side of the substation, but we have access through this road right here. It's probably too small to
Okay.
see, but that stays the same.
Would the easement include the additional amount from our current boundary line to the new boundary line? We want to make sure that that's covered.
Yeah, I can check on that.
Yeah. You know, because
I
we
think
may have felt
Yeah,
comfortable taking it to our property line, but now if we're moving it back, we want to make sure it, why would we
Yeah.
have an easement over our own property? So we may need to extend the easement.
Yeah, well, and the easement or the drawing shows it going all the way to the substation. And so I don't know if, because it was on our own property, if that easement description should go all the way to the substation, but we can check on that. I can make
Okay.
sure that that's included. That's a good catch.
Yeah.
And then Gary, I'll just need some help scheduling how we do approvals and we've already drafted the quitclaim deeds. But as far as getting council approval, we might need to do that at the next meeting. So,
Yeah, well, we can do a resolution that will handle that. We can do a resolution that will handle that. Did you do is there an agreement or just deeds, just trading deeds?
yep, just quitclaim deeds. We do have another easement that will get recorded on the east side of the bridge. So we have this identified, but on the east side of the bridge, we're doing a 30-foot construction easement because that's on the school property. But we need that 30 feet to make sure that we can build the bridge without any problems there.
What you say, construction, what about maintenance down the road? Would we still need the additional space?
Yeah, so the easement includes construction, but it's actually the approach to the bridge. So if the bridge is built up and it has a slope to it, it basically gives us, it's called a construction easement, but it's basically says we have access for maintenance, but we can also leave the slope on the bridge on that easement, moving forward. And so it should.
We wouldn't need any additional space for maintenance.
Yeah, I don't think so.
It makes a whole lot more sense, Ty, than it did before, that's for sure. Unless we wanted to build a fence through the outfield of the baseball diamond, and I don't want to do that.
Let's see.
It was
next
easier to
slide.
move. It was easier to move the lot line than it was to move that fence.
Absolutely.
Ty,
Yep.
how important is it that we have all the walkway on city property? Because up front by the street in front of the school owns that section of the walkway.
Yeah, so it's not as critical as whatever space they needed on the side of their building. Yeah,
Their building, yeah.
Yeah, so right now, we're on both sides of the trail. It's not a huge deal. We did talk about that, but it's
Okay.
if you get too close to the building, it gets more restrictive for
Right.
them than our concern with the trail, I think.
Okay, that's fine.
So,
Why don't you let them know where the bridge project's at, the latest thing on that.
so we've got responses from I think 4 or 5 different engineering firms or interest. So UDOT's putting out, they call it an RPLOC process, where they all put in a notice that they're interested in the project, and then we have a selection process to pick the one that we feel is the best suited to move forward on the project. And so that essentially starts engineering once that firm is selected. So maybe in another month, we'll have a engineering firm on board.
Okay, any further questions?
Ju-
So
just-
Ty, when did all this, if the school district's taking it to their board tonight or this week, and they'll approve it in their next meeting, which is in what, 2 weeks?
So it's
When
in
do you want to
September.
approve it? Oh, in
So-
September. Okay, got it.
Yes, so what they do is they put it on, they have to introduce the topic, and then they never vote on a topic the same night it's introduced. They introduce it, and then at their next month, then they'll vote on it first, or, second week of September. And so I think if we do it next meeting, and just take the lead on it, or if we wait till September, it'll actually be the exact same night that they do it. So either way would work.
Sounds good. We can have something done by then.
Any further reports? Ty?
Just back to the power bumps, I just want to thank you, Ty. We got a new gas range with a clock on it, and I've learned how to set the clock this last few weeks, so thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I thought you were still learning how to program your VCR.
I gave up on that. I went to the range.
Oh, nice.
Any
Tony,
updates from the council on anything else? Any other further questions?
Tony still has an 8-track player in his car.
Exactly right, yeah. I wish I did.
Yeah, yeah, it'd be worth something.
Well,
Uh,
there's
so
one reason why you can't idle, because you have to keep the motor running to keep the 8-track playing.
Yeah. Gary, does your wife ever tell you you're in the dark?
Almost all the time, but I've come to accept that.
You must have forgot to turn the switch on in your room. We've had a black screen the whole night.
Well, I'm down at Lake Powell, and they have a very limited amount of bandwidth down here. They don't have Utopia down here. And every
Yep.
time I touched start video, it tells me
Uh-huh.
you don't have enough bandwidth to do video. And so I thought, well, okay, they probably won't mind not seeing my face this time around, although I'd love to show you what I'm looking at right now.
That's not fair.
Oh, that's not fair, Gary.
I'm sorry.
Well,
It's a beautiful sunset. So
Yeah.
sorry.
thanks for joining us on your vacation.
Hey,
you get
these are
combat
important
for
things.
that,
So
you know.
actually, this is the best place in the world to be.
Yeah.
You're away from everybody, aren't you?
That's right. And I just don't have a screenshot behind me. It's real.
Well, bring a picture back with you.
Will do. Thanks, you guys.
Denise, you want to cover the ethical behavior pledge?
What that is a couple meeting, well, it was in July, I think, or the end of June. We did the fraud risk assessment. And one of the items that asked if we had employees and elected officials sign a ethics behavior pledge. And so I was asked to find one and put it together so that we could have everyone sign it and have those points next year when we do the assessment. So I reached out to the Recorders Association, and most everyone was using the one from the State Auditor's Office. So that's the one that's in the packet. If each one of you, it needs to be notarized. If each one of you want to sign that and have it notarized at your place of employment, or you can call me and I'll come into the city and notarize it for you, and then I'll get the employees all to sign it. So we'll have that checked off next year. That's it.
Question, do you want those done fairly soon, or do you want to do them next when we do our conflict of interest forms and do them together all at once? When do you want these?
We could probably do it at the same time we do the conflict of interest forms. Ty, did you do a conflict of interest form before?
Mhm.
Okay.
I think so.
All right. Yeah, we could do it all at the same time. We could actually wait until we start meeting in person if that's going to happen anytime soon. We just would need to have them signed before the next fraud risk assessment is done.
I just want to make it, more convenient for you rather than you have to come in. If we don't need it yet,
Yeah.
we can wait on that. I'll let you make that call.
Okay, I'll just let everybody know. Maybe we'll do it the same time we do the conflict of interest training and everything.
That would be awesome.
Do it all at once.
Anybody else?
Everything I'm interested in, sorry, everything I'm interested in causes conflict, just so you know, at least at home.
Hey, Mayor, this
Yeah.
is Eric. I maybe got one thing. Hey,
Go ahead.
part of my assignment is on the rec board. Just to let you know, that's now under the county. And so they've now hired a rec board director who's part-time employee for the county. And so that's now up and rolling and it seems to be going pretty good. There's a few little glitches that they're working through, but that seems to be moving forward. So
Appreciate that. They're still having you be on the board though, is that correct?
that's correct. Yeah, I'm still on the board, but it's more of a county run thing.
Right.
And so they've hired a new rec board director that's actually under a county employee that reports to the board. So it seems like the model should be working pretty good. So
Okay, thank you. Anything else anybody else got? Updates or anything else you want to ask, any questions? Dave, Jeff, Jeffrey, Tony? Okay. I want to thank all of you for being present tonight. Thank you for your input. Thank you for your diligence in helping out and the things you do. I appreciate your thought processes, each one of you, and the kind of things that you perform for the city. So thank you. With that, I'll declare this meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Mayor.
thank you.
So you have a
Thank
good
you very much.
See you later.